Welcome to the Audit and Risk Subcommittee meeting on the 4th of August. I'll call for apologies. There's Mayor ex officio. Thank you. Can I have someone move to accept that? Shane and Nicole. All in favour? Against? Carried. We move to minutes on page 3, so confirmation of minutes. Does anyone like to move in that direction? Shane again and Bob. Anything arising from those minutes?
Yes, Murray.
Yep, thank you, Shane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just with regards to my comments around Coast Ford, I just wanted to thank the comms team, Stephen and his team, for the continued comms through Facebook, especially. Well done. Thank you for keeping in front of that. It's definitely quelled a lot of interest in that crossing and kept the community up to date. Thank you.
Thanks, Shane. Yeah, I concur with that. There's been a lot of chatter around why it isn't open, and subsequently, I believe, was open for a day, Murray, and then had to be closed again because of another flood event. But that is the nature of ephemeral flows of rivers. Murray, you want to make a comment?
Yeah, just the state of the plains is that it doesn't take much rain to get up again. We're down to 3 cubics, and then now late last night it was up to 18. Mm-hmm. So even a day after the rain was still going up.
Thank you, Shane.
I just wanted to highlight my comments around asset exposure, that being of councillors, and hoping that work's being looked at. Thank you.
Thanks, Shane. Deborah?
Just with regards to property limbs, can I ask whether there is an intention to actually brief or bring forward a paper so councillors understand how property limbs actually property limbs.
It's just a minute.
Sorry, page. It's matters arising. Kelvin's working on it currently, and I just wonder if that report's going to be brought to council, because I think it's important that we understand, how property limbs and PIMs actually do work, because this is an area that a lot of ratepayers will end up contacting us as elected representatives.
Not through you, Mr. Chair, not the intention to bring it back to council, Deborah, but rather we will discuss it at governance level through our next briefing session, or next briefing session after the report's been prepared.
All right, so we're going to move in a second. All in favour of those minutes? Against? Carried. Thank you. And I neglected to call for conflicts of interest as item 3. Are there any conflicts of interest to identify today's meeting? None. Deborah? Yes. Microphone, Deborah. Yeah.
It's actually to do with how our policy around charging rates for granny flats.
Okay.
Have you to do that?
Have you posed that question of staff aware that you're going to be asking that question? They forewarned?
Only this morning, yes.
Okay.
Through you again, Mr. Chair, chain of events would be for Deborah to come and see me after the meeting, okay, to articulate what it is that she would like us to address, and that can be incorporated into our next manager's report.
Yeah, happy. Yeah, that's a good course of action, David. Thanks, Deborah. And we're following those processes. We'll end up with getting the right outcome. Just be good to have the full information for that meeting. So, yeah, if you're happy to do that, and speak with David afterwards. Thank you. Matters under investigation on page 11, I think it is. We've just got the one item there, David, that was to be reported this month.
Yeah, and that'll be back through the CA report. So
yes, yep. So, thank you. Verbal report. Obviously very high workload at present for council, mostly kicked off with ongoing three waters discussion, and I know that that's going to be continue on as a series of reports dated back from yourself and Kelvin, and mindful of the fact that we're getting information drip fed even as late as yesterday on that, and I think it's crucial from the respect of the full council, but also this committee, is to understand what that poses to us as far as ongoing balance sheet and ability to fund going forward, and of course delivery of 3 waters to our constituents. So we look forward to that continuing information to be fed through to full council. We're about to kick off with Dpr hearings, so some of our councillors around the table have increased workload as well, and again an outcome to the community that's going to be absolutely crucial going forward, determines the way forward for this district for the next 10 plus years potentially. Also, although not on these specifically on these major projects report, we'll have the addition going forward now that we've passed the budgets, David, and for Pines Clarify and the Darfield to Pines Pipeline, and also more in-depth view on the Town Centre Master Plan delivery process as well. So they'll tend to take over from some of the other projects that are starting to exit. As far as completion, we'll drop off that list and we'll have more oversight on those major projects. Just to comment, David, on the Audit New Zealand report on LTP, and a great outcome to see that signed off. And just to report to everyone again today that we held our bi-monthly meeting with SciComm, Sam, myself, David, with Steve Grove and Dave Wilson, and a number of good discussion points, David, I think that we'll get some more information on going forward. But just building a really good relationship at that level with the company, I think, has been crucial for all council going forward, that we get a better understanding of their direction and their relationship with us as far as agreed outcomes. Whilst we're not their board, we do want to align our views and practices and our values. So I'll move that as my verbal report for this month. If I can have a seconder for that, please. Bob, thank you. All in favour? Against and carried. What I neglected to say was the workshop this morning, which I thought was valuable. Sorry, now that we've moved it, but just a commentary on that. The workshop this morning following our self-assessment paper that went around, and I think all agreed that we certainly got value out of that, and there'll be some outcomes from that we'll report to Greater Council once we've got an agreed position on a way forward. David, page 12, Manager's Report.
Mr. Chair, thank you, and I'm going to get Kelvin to speak to items 1 and 2, but just before he does, you talked about 3 waters and the additional information that we continue to receive. As late as yesterday, we got an invitation from Local Government New Zealand offering the opportunity for them to come and talk to mayors and chairs about future developments going through the next, what happens in the next 8 weeks stuff. So we have accepted that, and we're just currently identifying dates that you will all be invited to. So we've given them dates on August 18, 25 and September 1. So those are dates that are generally clear in your calendars. So they'll come through. So as I said, I'm going to get Kelvin to talk to items 1 and 2, and then we'll collectively pick up on items 3 and 4.
Good morning, everyone. So point 1 is around the LTP audit and the report back from Audit New Zealand. As Murray had mentioned, pleasing result from that. Very thin report back from them, which really talks to a couple of matters which somewhat out of their control, but they were the Canterbury flooding, which occurred right on the point of signing the LTP, and we made a note within the LTP around potential consequences. In the context of the entire LTP, it was minor in terms of size, but had to be noted for best practice. Waka Kotahi funding levels, they weren't quite confirmed, as is the normal process with them at the time of the LTP, and there was just a note within that we potentially adjusting programs to reflect their funding levels. The third point was around the council's capital program and extent of carry forwards and ability to deliver. We'd spent a large amount of time with the auditors on that matter, and provided them comfort that we are in a better place to deliver that capital program. And the final point was a very technical matter where the receivables and payables on the balance sheets in the forward view of the world had not factored in inflation, so it comes out in the wash. It's nothing that of significant matter. Does anyone have any questions on that piece first?
Deborah.
Thank you. Just with regards to our rates, I've picked up that the audit response has been that they lack knowledge in this particular area, and it's our responsibility to go and seek our own legal reviews and opinions. So I'm just wondering, what is our process for doing that, and do we have contracted the appropriate skill set within the private sector, within the legal power frame, to actually give us feedback on those particular issues?
Just for clarification, is that in relation to the LTP or?
Yes,
Something I haven't seen, Deborah, but yeah.
sorry. No, it's the audit. It's the audit report, sorry.
Okay, I'll cover the audit point and then I'll answer that.
Okay, no, it's the comments of the audit report.
Our annual report, Deborah. Okay, yeah, thank you. Okay, we'll cover that in a minute. Kelvin. Shane, did you have a question, Shane, did you?
Yeah, I did. It was very similar to Deborah's, but just hoping that we have time to work through that audit report. Not going to.
Well, that's your opportunity now, is to ask questions, so yeah.
Thank you. Waka Kotahi funding levels, you'll see in the report that they've given their direction, but they haven't actually, sorry, I'm just trying to find the page here. It's not signed and sealed yet. The decision hasn't been fully made as to what the funding levels are. I think given that during the flooding event that we've had in the past, a lot of that State Highway 1 traffic actually diverted through to our district-owned arterial routes. I hope that's given some consideration moving forward from Waka Kotahi. Sorry, I have to go back the other way now. Excuse me. It's coming up to it. I think I've got a heap of questions, and it really pertains to moving through that report. So unless I'm going to flick back and forth through it, we'll probably spend a bit more time. I just want to know how much time we've got, Murray, to do that.
If you've got questions, Shane, we'll entertain them. Yeah.
I'll go through the report then. Page 18. Page 18. What percentage of return to cyclone return is seen in the income? Confirmation that dividend goes to general rate. Should it be going to funds to diversify our income portfolio to spread risk of income?
Sorry, where did I see that?
I'm on page 18.
Shane, are you questioning their report, or are you questioning our direction as a council?
I'm questioning the audit plan report. Page 18, which is page 3, sorry, David, of the audit report. Thanks, Kelvin. So I've got a number of questions.
Just for clarification, have we moved from LTP to annual audit?
I think we have, because I started.
Well,
let's
be clear of that. Have we moved from LTP?
the audit plan, yeah.
Okay.
Right, in regards to this report, it's an annual plan which gets produced every year. It's generally a templated format which will more than likely follow the previous year's plan, as to give the councillors guidance on direction they intend to take, where they want to focus their attention, and moving forward. A couple of points to note for us in regards of what we're intending to do around this reporting cycle is, while we've put in here that the council's water infrastructure assets will be revalued, the revaluation occurred early in the financial year, and we intend to take that valuation forward into the financial statements along with additions and disposals. We'll run a review to make sure that our viewers, or from the council's view, is that there's no significant change in that value. And we will run a valuation on investment properties. So the fee, as we've discussed, is we're still discussing that with the auditor, and intention is we'd like to have delegation to take to the mayor to sign this letter of engagement once we've concluded those discussions. So I'll take questions.
Oh, you go, Deborah.
Just in regard to that, with regards to our rates and the audit response that you've given in the second paragraph, that was around what I was asking, where there's a comment made that compliance with legalised legislation is beyond the scope of audit and our expertise as auditors, and the council has ultimate responsibility. My question around there was with regards to procurement of our legal opinions. Do we have the appropriate advice from our procurement strategy for our legal opinions to actually know that we are getting the best advice?
So regards procurement policy, no, but when we signed the LTP and we put forward the recommendation of the rates for the year, which we do every year, that is reviewed by Buttle Finlay to make sure that we're compliant with what we are legislated to do. The point here is the financial audit is to do with, have we put the rates into the right sort of buckets within the financial statements, etc., etc. We've treated the recognition of that revenue in the right way, as opposed to the complying with legislation of the Rating Act.
Yes, I'm happy with that.
Thank you, Kelvin. At page 18, or 3 of the report, District Council Group eliminate profit on any intra-group fixed asset additions. Can you explain that to me, what that actually means?
So this will be where a situation has occurred that Sycon may have acquired an asset from us. Example would be potentially a financial lease on their building, where we would eliminate that transaction from the group accounts. So we don't, effectively it's removing any double accounting.
Also in that same page, it's please explain eliminate profit and why.
The elimination of profit, similar question. It's where Sycon will charge us for services. The revenue that they make out of that disappears out of the group accounts. So ultimately, what is received, what we see through the financial statements of the council group is the cost of Sycon providing that service.
And the difference between fair value and carrying amount?
Carrying amount will be the amount sitting on the balance sheet at one point in time, and fair value is the value of the asset or liability at arm's length in a market sense.
Thank you. Still regarding the report? Yeah, I threw a whole heap of them out there in the start, and it was just around the return that Sycon give. So you know that the confirmation that the dividend goes to the general rate. Confirmation that the dividend that comes from Sycon goes to the general rate.
Not necessarily. It's a decision for the councillors to make where that's applied to, but in our current models, that's where it sits. But that's a broader discussion around investment portfolio and how we might want to recycle returns or investments.
Good.
This is the annual report.
Yeah.
So what we're reporting on is historical.
Yeah.
Going forward.
Okay.
So decisions going forward is separate from what we're reporting on for the previous financial year.
Thanks, Murray. Yep. That kind of throws a little bit what it's going into. I guess in terms of risk, obviously this is a audit and risk committee, so page 4 of the annual report, risk, fraud, whistleblower policy, is it working? The staff feel confident of confidentiality?
So specifically on that, that's so this is really around their testing that we have the internal controls in place. So they're outlining that they will look to, there is a risk in all organisations around management override of internal controls or other risks around that sort of probity type related transactions. And they will run a series of testing to make sure that there is no issues in their mind.
Thank you. Really, just sort of lastly, the Three Waters report that they have in here. You know, when you look at the process with which they follow, it's fairly light on the audit response. Really, I would hope that moving forward that we could utilise their knowledge and understanding of the risks involved, and that to be part of to form the opinions moving forward.
You've got to be careful here, Shane, with what the auditors can and can't do. So they're not engaged to inform us of potential risks and advise us. So there would be a stepping over the line from an audit point of view. We'd need to take other third-party information on this. But they are faced with an interesting dilemma moving forward around fair value of those assets. If there's a transaction to go ahead in the future, and that transaction is purely settling our current liabilities, there's a question there around the fair value of those assets. So I think there's a broader audit question for the whole sector to consider how this is what's going to occur going into the transaction and post-transaction in terms of who is booking what.
Thank you. That's all I have at this stage. Thank you.
I mentioned that the microphone's on. I mentioned that this is pretty much a carbon copy of the prior year. So again, as you outlined at the beginning, this is a template from Audit New Zealand that says these are the areas that we're going to focus our attention on. And given that, you know, a lot of what was happening last year is actually still happening this year. So our risk profile hasn't changed that much. So what might be useful, I was just thinking about it now, next year, is actually a cover paper that says if there's any new items in here. Because when I look through this, I don't know if they talked about their Three Waters approach last year. That might be the new item, but everything else is actually exactly the same as the prior year. It's the areas that they focus on. So my only question, well, two things, just around the Three Waters, what will be coming to audit and risk as opposed to full council? So given that there will be, you know, the work that you're going to be doing in the next 8 weeks, you know, there's going to be obviously impact on our balance sheet and our cash flow going forward. What content will be coming to the audit and risk as opposed to going to full council?
Maybe I can answer that, but it's not intended to come straight to audit and risk, but rather go to full council in terms of the way that we'll be responding. Preparedness, even right down to the utilisation of the $22.3 million that we've been allowed as well. I just want to remind everybody that this is the audit work program, so this is what they're telling us that they're going to do. And the real measure, I think, is twofold. Number one is in reverse audit. Number two, therefore, is the audit report against this, so it gives the satisfaction. But number one, come back to the comment that we made in the audit workshop prior to this meeting, and that's around the regularity of communication with our audit director to understand the report and where they perceive there might be any risks and also any trend movements within the sector.
David, just thinking, and Lisa's comment is pertinent, isn't it? Obviously, she's not party to all of the information that we get as full council, and it's a discussion we need to continue, obviously, having. I'm just thinking of it is a risk to this organisation, and whilst I concur with it not it being a full council discussion, I just wonder whether that information needs to be shared with our independent.
Oh, absolutely.
And that might be something that going forward, and Lisa, you've kept more abreast of it, so that when we are making decisions and we get the value of your input as well. I guess also the other conversation is about, and this will come up full council, so I'm prefacing that by saying that, David, we will have to be devoting some considerable time to understanding this. And Calvin, you started last week in the briefing with the paper. I guess it's an understanding from all of us that we get timely information to make an informed decision. And although we've been told there's 8 weeks where we do nothing, I think there's also 8 weeks where we inform ourselves and get ourselves up to speed in that time, so that when we are at decision-making time, we're as fully abreast of this conversation as possible, rather than waiting for 8 weeks and then having the discussion. And Alicia, did you have further?
I just had one other thing, which relates to a little bit around the Audit and Risk Committee terms of reference, but also relates to this, is that I would like to see an internal audit program beginning at each financial year that actually outlines what internal audits we plan to do for the year. Because within this, their focus, where there could be good crossover and benefits made and value and savings, is that if we were able to have a conversation with Audit New Zealand earlier, or we'll be able to predict which areas they were going to focus on. For example, procurement's in here. So we could have had procurement in our internal audit program, and 3-4 months ago we could have delivered an internal audit, which would hopefully, when they rock up with this, say, oh, we're going to focus time and put all this energy here, we can say, look, we've actually already had an independent internal audit, so they might be able to place some reliance on that. So there's a little bit of crossover, and again, added benefit in having an internal audit program, as opposed to at the moment our terms of reference says that we will have a risk-based program, but for the last 12 months I haven't seen any internal audit report come within this committee. So for the next financial year, I'd like to see a program of audit that says, and it doesn't have to be huge, it might only be 3 or 4 pieces of work that we're going to do, and that would include the PIR as well. So the next financial year, I'd like to see an internal audit program that includes independent assurance. Thank you.
David, do you want to make a comment on that? It seems like that's a work program that we could add to our list.
Yeah, it is, and I'm just a wee bit mindful of the relationship we've got with, is it Deloitte at the moment, in terms of the provision of services that they're doing internally across South Island councils, but also I think that is one of those conversations you have when you've got the audit director in front of us, in terms of how that would benefit the Audit New Zealand program, and also how that would be funded and resourced as well.
Microphone, Annalisa. Yeah.
Regardless of whether Audit New Zealand see that they can get some benefit and savings out of it, because they might say, oh, we can place a little bit of reliance, but we still need to do all our work. Good practice is that we should have, consistent with other councils around the country, there should be an internal audit program that's either independently delivered, or we have internal capability and resource to do it. But we've got it in our terms of reference as delivering internal audit, and I haven't seen one internal audit report in the 12 months that I've been here.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thanks, Annalisa. Nicole, you had your microphone on, you dropped off.
Well, no, I just switched off because it just came through with Annalisa talking, because the valuation of assets carried at fair value. I was actually going to ask a question around that, of the fact that it's only a year and they're asking to justify why we need to revalue. But obviously with the Three Waters stuff, maybe where their focus is. But I think that was something that was asked last time as well, because something like infrastructure that's in the ground, roads and that, is not going to change markedly, I would have thought, from year to year. So with us having the 3-year rolling basis, because it's quite a large piece of work to be doing, whether there was also direction from local government New Zealand or whatever on what is standard practice of doing that to say back to the auditors. But if it is actually because of Three Waters, then that's a whole different thing to be looking at. Understand my thinking?
Yeah, no, I understand your thinking, and it's a difficult one because yes, you can have standard practice around how often you revalue, but that's a local government New Zealand viewpoint, not a chart. Not a, I'm going to say chart of accounts, but it's not. It's the New Zealand standards of accounting which drive this, and the point of this standard is that you either book the assets at fair value or their carrying value based on no material movement in the last time you valued. Now, Audit New Zealand gets quite down in the weeds on this and talk about, well, how can you assure that it hasn't changed? Therefore, you need to go get an opinion that the valuation hasn't changed, and therefore to get that opinion, you end up revaluing. So it becomes problematic.
Well, to me, it doesn't make sense. Like reevaluating pipes, how do we do that? We have to go through and, I mean, the only way we can do that is go put cameras down along a whole network, and we can't do that. And so there has to be some reasonableness on what's been asked of us. Yes. But I'll just leave that.
Well, I see David writing furiously, and I should imagine that we will get something back in due course, David, that will inform the direction there. So the questions are all very valid, particularly around the internal audit. And I think you're correct, we haven't for some period of time. So, yeah, very timely to mention that. Deborah?
Yes. Just with regards to ethics and integrity of our organisation, how are we going to monitor our transparency? I'll just give as an example, quite often there can be concern around the number of items that are taken in workshops and in public excluded, and whether on balance the public is actually missing out on an important debate, while we do have in place the requirement to explain why we go into these scenarios. Is there a requirement to have a balance or a check to actually ensure that we are just debating robustly, instead of just extending staff in some cases as to why we're doing things in public excluded, the timing of when we actually need to be releasing information to the public if it's available to, or is that information just, for example, sitting in the background and we need to actually undertake an audit to see what can now be released? I'd just like to know our transparency program around our requirement to report issues to our general public.
Yeah, there is a process that we follow, and I think more and more councillors are becoming aware of the need to release information, but equally we're aware of the fact that certain discussions have to take place in public excluded to protect individuals or organisations, prices, as the case may be, but you find the majority of cases that that's actually released further down the track. Also, we've been reviewing, and you yourself initiated the review of the content of workshops or briefing sessions that we have going forward as well. So they are very valuable from a technical perspective, and also to often get a direction set from councillors.
So is it appropriate for us to ask, for staff to do an analysis of how much work we've actually done within workshops and public excluded versus what amount of work is actually transparent within the council agenda itself?
I think you find it might duplicate a request that all councils have recently had from a national body, Deborah, to ask the same question, which we responded to, so I can circulate the answer.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Don't just make it clear that is not a matter that the external auditors will look at.
Yeah.
No, I was just going to say that. From the chair position, I'm comfortable that what comes to this committee is appropriately in either public or PX. and feel free to challenge me on that whenever you feel like it, as I'm sure you would. Shane.
Yeah, Murray, I just wanted to concur with your comments around the Three Waters reporting and highlighting that. We're facing the biggest risk, I guess, to our district that we'll ever see, and probably have ever seen, with the Three Waters reform, and we're yet to actually see some clear data in front of us as a Audit and Risk Committee. I mean, we're receiving it from externally, but I'd really like to, apart from Calvin's report last week, that really gave me an indication that the current government predictions or figures, whatever they're using, are merely speculative from the difference that we were given. We are faced with the biggest decision that we're going to make in terms of risk. It's probably the biggest. And as an elected member by our ratepayers, I want to be sure that I'm taking back to them clear options that this will be, if we're in or out, if this will be the best decision for our people moving forward intergenerationally. And currently, with speculation between the figures and the amount of councils that are considering not opting in, which I think figuratively now is about 18 out of the 67, I would like to know what they see as their risk. What are we not seeing? So I concur with your comments, Mr. Chair, and just wanted to leave that with you. Actually, just before I said, Deborah, you've mentioned something around professional scepticism. I think one of the last pages here on the auditor's report. Exercising professional scepticism means that we will not accept everything that we are told at face value. We will ask you and management to provide evidence to support what you tell us. We will also challenge your judgments and assumptions and weigh them against alternative possibilities. Thank you.
Yes. Sorry, David.
I was just going to repeat comments I made before about Three Waters. You're right, it is the biggest decision, not for this council, but for this country, actually, that we're making. I made the comment before that we continue to receive information, and the next batch of that information is due around the 13th of October, and also to remind you that we have invited the LGNZ review team, and we've given them 3 dates to come down and talk to council as well.
Just mindful, Shane, and I've had this conversation with a number of people outside of formal committee meetings and with the Chief Executive, that of course we only meet once a month, and this information is coming through weekly, actually, and I think it's a decision for full council, and rather than it be filtered through this committee, I think it's appropriate that we go directly to council, and that way we can make timely decisions. If we delay it for making a recommendation to council, all we're doing is adding to that time frame, and we know the time frame's compressed. I think if we're talking about risk, we're adding risk by doing that. It's my personal opinion, and I think that it's far better to go to full council, and we can workshop papers that come through from DIA or formally accept or reject at council meetings, which we have on a far more regular basis in this subcommittee. So where we at?
Right, have you done your stuff, or okay? So health and safety.
Yeah.
So I've attached the monthly report. I'm just going to take that as read, and I'll answer any questions on it. But I thought, Mr. Chair, you might be interested in some of the conversation at our Executive Health and Safety meeting, which was held on the 26th of July. One of the things we identified was vulnerability of water treatment plants and our ability to protect those and how we do that. Talked about critical risks from the IOD presentation, and that's item 4 on this report. Our health and safety strategy document, in reach devices, and you'll note that I've been circulated to 22 staff, and there are more available at the moment. Drug and alcohol policy is being extended. The audit and risk work program, and we're reminded ourselves that business as usual and critical risk are on the work program of the subcommittee and need to be integrated back into our in-house program. Our recording system for health and safety events, so we use the Vault system. We're going through a tender process, just evaluating that system at the moment. I think there were eight tenderers responded. We shortlisted that down to 4, and interviews are taking place over the next 2 weeks, and that's really around the recording staff awareness through the induction process and also the response that we have to those. We're acknowledging workload priorities and workload levels across the organisation and the impact that that's having. You know, we're having legislation thrown at us left, right and centre, which is requiring quite significant but detailed responses, and also in terms of business as usual, it's just not slowing down. You know, we continue to grow at a rapid rate, and that's evidenced in terms of consents coming through the organisation and the demands that that's placing on us. And finally, just health and safety representative visibility across not only HQ but the entire organisation. The other thing that's on the report, and probably more importantly, and going back to page number, it's page 13 of the agenda. And it's to pick up on the conversation that was started at last month's meeting. We all went to the IOD Health and Safety Workshop where I thought there was some quite valuable learnings came out of that. One thing that's incumbent on this subcommittee now, given our link to health and safety responsibilities throughout terms of reference, are some of the things that we need to do to respond to that. And for me, there's a couple of key things. The first one is around our preparedness for when things go wrong. So we know what happens when an incident comes, you know, flood, high wind, earthquake, fire, etc. We are well practiced and well organised in terms of our response, not only as an organisation, but also through our association with other agencies. But it's when other things go wrong. How agile are we as an organisation? And that's both at governance level and at operational levels. But we talked about the 3 lines of defence: awareness, assessment and recommended action. The next one for me is quite important. As you know, I sit on the Local Government New Zealand Audit and Risk Committee, and every month we do a significant deep dive into one of our risks. And I think really from the work programme, Mr Chair, that's one thing that we really need to pick up. We've been covering it off well thus far with site visits, and they have served purpose, albeit we're now on, you know, we'll repeat visits for a number of these things. So the why question needs to be asked: how well are we doing that? And also more formal processes for engagement with our stakeholders around health and safety, with again focused on big builds and things like that. But there are a number of other organisations that we have and or need relationships with going forward. So I repeated those from last meeting, really just to get a conversation started. We talked this morning about a further workshop to discuss some of our work programme stuff, acknowledging this is the start of the year, so we've got 11 months ahead of us. So what are the key things out of the IOD workshop that we want to pick up on? A, from a committee perspective, or B, direction that you would like to give to staff to actually push some through. And maybe as a starter, it's around the deep dives. But happy to and interested to hear response from subcommittee members around the table as to what are the next steps that you want us to push through on this.
Thanks, David. I'm just looking at my order of list. I've got Annalisa first. I'm hoping I've got that right. That isn't upset. Thanks, Annalisa.
Thanks, David. Yeah, thank you for the report. As said previously, it's improving kind of month on month. A few things from me. I was pleased to see, no surprises, but I was pleased to see the commentary from our main partners in our major projects. So there's obviously 2, we've got feedback from 2 of our major partners there. So my question was being, what's our timeline looking like for full completeness on every project? I guess that's what good looks like, and that's what we're aiming for. It was also great to see that we had attended a toolbox meeting, and I had a question around who attended. I'm assuming it was our health and safety team, but again, moving to good health and safety governance and culture, wondering if that's been rolled out to SLT and other members of the senior team. The incidents that are lodged as obviously an extract from Vault. I'm assuming that when those the root cause analysis and results comes through, that will also go into vote. So just to close the loop on some of those incidents, it would be good in next month to see the results that have come out, to see if there was any serious root cause analysis. And my final thing was around strikes, as in hitting cables, and whether we do any analysis or looking forward over capturing, the number of strikes, and again, root cause analysis on those strikes. Was it because of bad planning? Was it because the underground plans weren't saying that obviously the line where that we expected? But again, understanding root cause, was it because we didn't follow process, or was it just because so a little bit more, rather than just saying it was a strike, but no harm done. Strikes can be very, very significant, or they can. So a little bit more information on that.
Yep.
But other than that, it's great to see that this report's just getting better and better. So thank you.
Deborah.
Thank you. Can I ask a question on page 14? When we're looking at is asbestos on our radar, our risk radar, is that in relation to contaminated land, hazardous chemicals, or camping ground operations with asbestos, or is it asbestos plus those 4 that are actually listed?
This was a question that was raised or asked, should I say, by the presenter.
Yeah.
And that was the presenter asking us, how do we assess that? So the answer to the question may well be, yes, we think it is possibly a risk, and we would like staff to further investigate. That's one of the direction things coming through.
Sorry, Deborah, that transcript there is a transcript from that training?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, not questions we're posing or David's posing, they were questions that we posed on the day. So, sorry to interrupt, but you continue on.
No, it's just with regards to camping ground operations, I'm aware that while we own some camping ground operations, there are camping ground operations run by incorporated societies within our district. Camping ground operations, we actually delegate, I guess, responsibility to another party. I think it's Food and Health, to actually undertake our monitoring and be able to bring back compliance issues, I guess, with regards to the certification. I just wonder, is it possible that we can actually understand that process a little bit clearer, where we do engage a third party to understand if there are any issues around our compliance with our camping grounds?
I'll look through you, Mr. Chair. I'll note that question, Deborah, and talk to staff after the meeting.
Shane.
Yep, just quickly from me, and I highlighted it again in the minutes from last week, was the concern around safety for councillors as a contractor. We do really good work here as a council, and I guess as an all-risk committee, and identifying risks to staff and contractors. I just want clarification on, as a contractor, as a councillor, what responsibility does council have to its most forward-facing asset in the public eye? And I know there are circumstances around the table of where that has come to a head.
Can I suggest that the best way to respond to that is through is full council, get that discussion around the table,
yep,
and really with the mayor in the room as well.
Thank you.
Yep.
And just secondly, I'd like to congratulate, I guess, the contractors for reporting the incident that's happened. I mean, as Sparky, probably be easy to wave that off quite quickly as electric shock. So I just want to congratulate them for reporting. Murray, thank you.
I'm going to have to comment there, Shane. Actually, I was going to make a comment around that, David. I know we're awaiting a report from Kevlar Homes, but I hope it has been reported to the appropriate authority, because it is an electrical accident, and regardless of their report, that should be reported to the authority.
Yeah, I'll double check that.
So if we can just follow that up, because I won't say anything that will prejudice that, but an electric shock shouldn't occur if work's been done correctly. Now, I'm not preempting that report in any way, but I think it is incumbent on us to report that to the licensing commission. Yeah. Sorry, Nicole.
It's all right, Murray. I might have missed, David, if you're talking about the follow-up from the health and safety governance workshop. So you're saying that with the opportunity to reflect on these key learnings and how we may transition some of these into our work plan. So are you asking us to select which ones, or what are we doing, or have I missed further conversation about
yes
that?
and no. I'm possibly as much directing on the deep dives.
Yeah.
And the formal engagement with our stakeholders, but Deborah's also picked up on the asbestos one as well, and also a review of our work program.
Because it's quite a long list, but I think these are things that need to be worked through so that we've got an assurance as our Audit and Risk Committee that these have been looked at, since these have been things that have been highlighted to us.
And, one of the things, for example, the second last bullet point, you will have heard my reference, from the internal committee, that we're mindful of that. So that's more an operational direction than a committee direction.
Sorry, I've lost my... here we go. Just going to the health and safety report itself, and it's good to see those the reporting that's come through, and I assume Annalisa has brought this up. We're waiting on other reports to come back from the other companies involved, but I would hope that then we would do an assessment as well. The one with the Pines Resource Recovery Park, there is a note here that standard operating procedures restrict the zone around the working plant such that no one is in the safety zone around the rig. I would question, and hopefully this will come through, with the safety zone that has been allowed for, that has looked at that the actual container completely falling off into its side has actually been taken account of. So there is sufficient area around it. Not that it was because someone wasn't there at the time. A safety zone is just whatever measure that's been taken is quite important looking at this going forward. This sort of thing will definitely kill someone if it lands on them. And
it's a sticky.
Yeah, it is. So it's just for going forward to make sure we do have those things in place, and it is quite open that, if this happens again, which touch wood it doesn't, but at least we are totally prepared for, and that, we can avoid any other, something happening to someone, because we've made sure that this is in place for each time these containers are moved, and that's quite regularly, because they're coming and going. I don't know how often they come and go, but anyway. So,
thanks, Nicole. Bob,
Yeah, I'd just like to understand more on our procedure for engaging contractors. Just something that I'd like to hear more about. And the second thing is, how liable are we for the actions of other company that we own?
So two questions. The first one I'll deal with by way of diversion, and I'll get Murray to give us, not now, but give us some input into the manager's report for next month, just so that you've got that in front of you. Companies that we own, i.e. Sycon, so as the 100% owner, basically what happens to them happens to us. And so that's, Murray talked to the chair, should I say. Can I just talk about a reference this morning to a meeting that we had at governance level, so that's one of the open door things.
David, can I just confirm, so reputation-wise, yes, what happens to them happens to us. Legally, no, because we are a shareholder of that organisation. A shareholder cannot be prosecuted. the company itself is.
So, Mr. Chair, I've got enough to take back and prepare a report for next month.
Yeah,
particularly around some of the details.
I think a lot of that, David, talks to the discussion we'll have going forward around our work program as well. A lot of the questions that have been posed out of today, so I think that's been beneficial to the conversation. So we've got a motion that the Audit and Risk Subcommittee receives the manager's report for information. We've got a mover for that, Annalisa and Deborah. All in favour? Against? Carried. Thanks, David. We go on to item 49, which you're going to speak to subcommittee terms of reference.
Yeah, I am. So we are required to review on an annual basis our terms of reference. So that is what we are doing at the moment. It's on pages 50 and 51 and 52 of the agenda. The key thing I want everybody to focus on is the purpose, and satisfy yourself that that is still the purpose of the Audit and Risk, bearing in mind that we are a subcommittee of council, we're appointed by council, our terms of reference are signed off by council. Membership is determined by council as well, and during our workshop this morning we raised some questions about future appointment, and obviously that is a recommendation that will go back to council or the new council for consideration post-election in October of next year. The key things are the terms, and I'm just reading from this, under purpose. The purpose is to assist council discharge its responsibilities, not abrogate responsibilities, discharge. The third, we make reference to health and safety. We talk about integrity and appropriateness of internal and external accountability, and cross that over to Annalisa's comments about internal audit before. Appropriateness of risk management systems, and for me this is the one that's grown the most in the last 12 months, Mr. Chair, and the awareness of it. Compliance with laws is a no-brainer, and safeguarding council's financial assets, and that safeguard is also around the risk, and we know that we're about to lose 35 to 40% of our net asset value on the 1st of July 2024. That'll be replaced, of course, by an equity investment in an entity of a similar value. So again, it's how do we expect that to play back as well. There's some minor alterations that have been made, and this is a marked up version of the terms of reference. So process, Mr. Chair, is for looking for comments from subcommittee members. If there are any suggested changes, we will debate those and then refer back to full council proposed amendments to our terms of reference.
Annalisa.
No surprises from me. So under point 3, the internal control framework, 3.4, we've got engage in a risk-based internal audit program. What I'd like to see is that the internal control framework still stands and is still relevant, but then I think we should need another section that says internal audit, so that actually becomes its whole new section. And then within that, we as a committee, we will endorse the internal audit program for the year, which would be the first bullet point. We'd endorse the annual program, and then we would receive and review any internal audit reports. And then we would also receive reporting on actions and the closeout of those actions from those reports. So that's my recommendation for the change, that internal audit needs its own section with 3 bullet points underneath it, which is endorse the annual program, receive the reports, and then make sure that the actions from those reports are closed out. Because at the moment it gets lost, and that's probably why we've kind of gone 12 months as a committee and gone up.
You're right.
So if we've got its own section, then.
Yep.
But other than that, I think that we went through this process fairly comprehensively when we did that workshop.
Yes.
12 months ago, didn't we?
Shane?
I'm just interested to hear from Annalise, in that internal report, would that also include self-assessment and development of the committee?
No.
Separate again?
Separate again.
Yeah, thank you.
I think, Shane, that would be as we discussed earlier today, that would be a recommendation from this subcommittee to full council. It's not a terms of reference thing. It's just about how we structure that committee going forward. And I think that's it. It's rather than it being a formally noted process here, it's a way that we would operate going forward. And I think we seem to be in agreement around that discussion this morning, that there's a merit in doing that assessment, I think, and then formulating the committee based on those. We've got time to do that. We've got another one of these before the end of the training.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that might be, we'll have learnt some things in that process, and it might be that we alter the TOR at that stage for the incoming.
I was going to add to that question, Shane. In reviewing this document, I just went back and found a few other council audit and risk committee terms of reference and just did a recce compared to theirs to ours. The other thing that was in some was a section on the appointment of independent members. So we can consider whether that's relevant, and it also talked about the appointment of members to the audit and risk committee from boards, etc. But it brought in the skills. So it obviously said it was the responsibility of the committee to appoint independent members, because obviously lots of other councils have got more than one, and it was the responsibility of the council to actually do the skills evaluation, self-assessment on a such and such basis. So it's actually mandated by the terms of reference if you want to make it that formal that it becomes. But I didn't bring it up because it's kind of a best practice, nice to have, but if you consider it important, then yes, other councils have done that.
I think, as my previous comments, and Lisa, we only workshopped that this morning, so to try and nut something out here now would probably be disingenuous, but I think we have got time before the end of this training in 12 months' time to do that, and I think that would be, if we note that, David, I think that's the time that we have that personal opinion here, that's the time we have that discussion, because we'll have formulated a better idea about where we're heading and what those skill gaps are likely to be. Because to be honest, we'll know who's not going to be running again as well. And as David said, there's no guarantees that any of us standing will come back on, but there is a guarantee if you don't stand, you aren't going to come back. So that's fairly much a given. Nicole.
I second what Annalisa has brought up about the internal audit and seeing that, that is a gap that is probably something we need to look at. And one of the ones that sitting in here and that I'm just concerned about, that we're not seeing so much reporting, is compliance with legislation standard and best practice guidelines. Though we might be complying, it would be nice to actually be reporting that we are complying on these things, because this is something that is legally quite important that we need to make sure that we're looking at. The other thing, and this needs to be a discussion as a whole council, is actually the term potentially the elected member may serve on the subcommittee of being 2 electoral cycles, and whether that's appropriate going forward now that we sort of review how we're looking as a committee.
And that'll be one of those things that'll be recommended back to council by way of advice post the next election, is in terms of the number of people, but also the background to those people, and whether it needs to be aligned to the water process or not.
That's actually an interesting point, because as we're discussing that, just thinking, depending on the outcome of the representation review, we may have less councillors to choose from, and it may actually alter our entire thoughts around the makeup of subcommittees.
Actually, the outcome of the representation review, we will have less councillors, because we've got 11, and there's the highest one is 10, is my understanding.
Yes,
so sorry to correct you, Chair, but
yes. We could potentially go back and stay with a revised, there might be the 4 options, but that's precluding this debate on that as well. So yes.
So, Mr. Chair, I've picked up reviews of particularly around 3.4, or expanding beyond 3.4, section 3, and then the rest of it's some advice stuff back to council subsequent to the next review.
So a question of process, David. we haven't got that wordsmith in front of us now. Are we happy to go with what Annalisa has said and allow you to wordsmith that and in principle pass today?
Oh,
For
no,
council,
what
will
we'll
you
do
bring
is
that
I'll
Thank you.
pick those comments up
Yes,
and it'll be included in the manager's report for next month.
next month. Thank you. Yeah. So we get a chance to then recommend. We've still got time frame to achieve that.
So we approve at the next
AMR meeting.
September meeting.
Yeah,
that's what
for
I
adoption by council.
Yeah.
Yes, Deborah.
Just following on from the Three Waters review, do we actually need to consider the RMA reviews as well and the impact that could possibly have on our organisation going forward?
Short answer is yes, and add to that list future for local government, but not just yet, because with respect to the RMA, we know that there's 3 proposed pieces of legislation. We know that they're going to go through a select committee process. We haven't really had too many eyes on them at the moment. We have in terms of the next steps, we've all prepared submissions to that.
I guess, Deborah, in some ways, looking through that purpose, we've got ensure compliance with appropriate laws, regulations, standards. So, I mean, that's fairly loose, but, we're always impacted by national level legislation. So I guess, very loosely, we're covering it all through that. Yeah, without being specific, it's a bit hard to be specific about something we don't know yet.
The area where you are covering it off is through the risk framework, and the approach we take, which we don't have this meeting due to constraints on resources with what's going on, but a deep dive into risk areas capture these things.
Okay, no further questions. We've got a recommendation in front of us. I can ask someone to so moved. Shane and Bob seconded. All in favour? Against? And carried. Thank you, David. Subcommittee membership and chairmanship, page 53.
Yeah, so this was a fairly innocuous little report prepared. There has been some discussion around audit and risk subcommittee circles on both of these topics in recent months. So I thought I would prepare just a guidance paper, firstly with respect to subcommittee membership. So this is around appointment, and it makes reference also to skill-based requirements, which we have just completed a self-assessment. We've identified some skill gaps that we will identify through those. Remind ourselves that this is a subcommittee of council. We have our own terms of reference, membership, purpose, etc., and also a number of operational guidelines, which largely are born out of the terms of reference. In terms of skill-based requirements, I got enough takeaways in a previous discussion around making sure that we take advantage of membership of outside bodies and also training opportunities for which there is an elected member budget as well. So I would encourage everybody to in the first instance, make reference to those opportunities, and secondly, come and talk to key staff about how those opportunities may be played out. In terms of variation to the membership, again, we acknowledge that the current membership is ward-based, 1 per ward, with the chairman appointed over the top and an independent. The independent member is appointed for a 4-year period, the rest of you for the length of the triennium. If there are any proposed changes to the appointment process, or indeed the number of members around the table, that would be by way of recommendation back to council. We don't have the opportunity or the ability to actually effect those changes ourselves. With respect to the chairmanship, slightly different. The subcommittee has the responsibility for appointing its own chair. So we have heard previously from the chair that he's interested in promoting continuity, and that may cause reflection on how long, Murray, I'll let you speak for yourself, but how long the incumbent may wish to stay in that position. But it is up to the subcommittee itself to elect its chair should that opportunity arise, and that would be done from within the current membership. So that's just a wee paper of backgrounding process, Mr. Chair. Happy to answer any questions from any members on content of that.
So there any, lost my microphone out. Any questions on that from around the table? The outcome from this I'd like to get today is a recommendation to, in principle, agree for the replacement for my position. And I've spoken before, and I'll just reiterate it for the sake of clarity. I've always believed that there's two important things around this: is knowing when to stand and knowing when to stand down. And I think the appointment of the independent has been a huge success from my perspective. My role coming in 2 years ago, I saw it as we had an extremely inexperienced audit and risk, and I don't mean that to offend anyone. I think everyone would agree with that statement. And both myself and Sam, as the ex officio, were the only carryovers from that. Obviously, I'll remain on the committee if that's the wish of the committee. What my focus was to change the focus of this committee to some degree. We'd been largely a finance-led committee, and I think we recognised an early workshop. So we organised 2 workshops, if we recall back, organised 2 workshops fairly early in the piece. And from that, I think we got some good direction going forward. We also had, of course, Kelvin appointed to his position, so it was timely to be able to look at that from a skills base around the table from a staffing perspective. We now have completely revised reporting formats, and they're going to continue to evolve here. And think about the major projects, the financials and health and safety. They are still a work in progress, Annalisa, as I look to you, but I think we're in a far better space than we were. We've gone to a new reporting format on a number of items as well. We've increased our risk focus, and we're still evolving that. There's still a way to go, and the discussion today and the previous discussions tells us that. The appointment of the independent is best practice by OAG. It's also best practice to appoint an independent chair. It's fair to say that I was reticent about that 2 years ago. I'm no longer reticent about that. I think that I've carried this from a chair perspective as far as I can carry it with my skill base, and I think the skill base that openly Annalisa will bring to this role, particularly around previous discussions we've had around interaction with our auditor in particular, will be a skill base that she will bring with her experience to that as well. And it'll bring a fresh flavour and a fresh viewpoint to the chairmanship role. We've also reflect on the training that we've done as a group, and I think that's been a success. And not only just for this committee, but we've broken that out to full council. And I think reflecting back, I think we've, if we all look at the self-honesty that we had in our own assessment this week, I think, yes, we've got skills gaps, as everybody has skills gaps, but we've also had an increase in skill ability around this table, and I think that's going to increase and continue. So what I would like out of this today is personally as a recommendation for my replacement, and then also a recommendation to David to begin the formal process of how that will manifest in a report to bring to council for a formal adoption. So, Bobby, you move appointment of Annalisa to become chair. Do I get a seconder for that? Thank you, Deborah. Any further discussion on that?
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
I guess, Mary, thank you very much for your words there, and I just want to assure, I guess, maybe the 2 people that are watching, but everyone else in the room, that robust discussion has happened around regarding this subject. There are a number of concerns raised by our full council around the decision-making process and where we were heading with this. And I guess probably the best person to elaborate on that would be David, just to I guess confirm that the decision that we're making, that has been made in workshop and here, is the best decision for our council, our ratepayers, and for the I guess organisation moving forward. I totally understand, Murray, that promoting the best person to the chair's position is the right thing to do, and I agree with you on that. In terms of development, we've discussed that as well, for the opportunity of incoming elected members to enhance their development by allowing for further development to continue. But I guess probably the best person to elaborate on some of those points would be our CEO. Thank you, David.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just looking at the wording on today, so we're not recommending So we'll just say if we just delete the two words recommends to council.
On that, there's a property portion of this as well. It's young, and one of this very open. Transition.
I think there's actually so they become C and C becomes D. And D is the acknowledges
Oh, yeah.
acknowledges that council leader is stepping down from so it's not specific. This would not be specifically covered, but the amount of money is quite insignificant in terms of that would be decent councils operating budgets.
Any further discussion? None, for the move or accept that, all in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Kelvin, Treasury report. Page 55.
Well, again, we'll just take quick page turns from page 56. Dashboard key highlights here are that gross borrowings remain unchanged. We haven't had to draw down any further debt going into the year end. But what we have done is dipped into the cash and deposits, which now mean position. Moving down to cost of debt, with the adoption of the LTP to maintain compliance with our fixed debt requirements, we've increased the number of swaps, therefore the percentage of current debt which is fixed is quite high. But when I'll move to that in later pages, then the cost of debt has come up somewhat with the cost of swaps rising. Cash and investments, as I said, they've come down slightly with the using that as funding. Debt position, not too much there has changed in terms of the facilities we're dealing with, and you can see down the bottom what is fixed and floating. Page 58, an interest rate risk management. At last meeting, we had two interest rate risk management graphs sitting there. One was our current position, and the second was if the LTP was adopted. LTP now having been adopted, this is in here, so we need to remain within the minimum and maximum of our fixed rate. And you can see the lighter blue bar graph within that shows that we're sitting within the range at this point. And that's consequently with taking out some of those new swaps, our duration of fixed debt has moved out slightly and that cost has gone up. You'll note on the right where for all our derivatives are with Westpac. We don't have a preference over who we go to. We go out each time we want to take a fixed piece of debt, well, not fixed debt, sorry, a swap, and we get prices in from the market and we choose the most appropriate terms. It just happens that Westpac have been the most appropriate. Cash investments, nothing has changed on that page other than the balance having come down where we've used fixed deposits to fund operations. Page 60, debtors, really good news story here in rates. If we go to the very bottom left-hand table, you can see there the percentage outstanding over the total rates for the 2021 year was 2.1%, which is as low as it has been over the recorded piece here. We do have a high amount sitting in the environmental services space at 1.376 in the 91 plus days. Large part of that relates to development contributions, and that really we raise the invoice at the point in time that someone submits a resource consent or a building consent, so they know they need to pay this. They have to pay those before we'll issue the consents. So potential that we have these sitting around and haven't issued yet. Moving on to the market data, look, the interesting point here, and we're seeing it, and we saw it through our swaps that we've taken out, we are seeing a lift in curves. The Treasury will put their official cash rate out in 2 weeks' time. There's a fair bit of debate going on that it will probably have a little lift. So just as we're sitting here now, the unemployment figures have come out for the quarter and they are down. Very, very tight labour market now. Inflation, if you move to the next page, you'll see has taken a big tick up. So look, who knows where the governor will go with the Reserve Bank, but it's I'd say we're going to see some rate rises in the next wee while, and the numbers that we're seeing coming through from banks in terms of forward curves are ticking up. So I'll take any questions on that report.
No, I'll just make sure microphone on.
Kia ora, Calvin. Thanks very much for the report. Whilst I might not understand all of it, I do enjoy reading it. The 3.9 debt, why would we borrow such quite a small amount when obviously we'd have the headroom to take that from?
So why would we borrow such a small amount? So we've got gross borrowings currently of, just getting back to the page, of 60.2. So we've got debt with banks of 60.2. Look, yes, we could use all of cash to fund that, but we do need to hold an amount of cash reserves for a COVID impact, various things like that. So it's prudent to make sure that you've got some cash sitting in the accounts, and we're just rolling that down to a reasonable level at this point in time. Is why we've suddenly gone from a positive cash position to a negative cash position.
Hey, thanks very much for that, and thanks for the explanations on the report here too. I immediately think about questions, and you've got it clearly documented here, so thanks for a very comprehensive report. I just had a question on page 3 regarding Melbourne Health and Community Welfare Trust, the 200,000 there at 3%. Why is that in there?
It's a loan that trust has provided the council.
Yep.
I don't know the background of it, but it is a reasonably small amount, and it's a fixed rate amount.
Bob. Microphone, Bob.
It was when we built the medical centre. Yes. We didn't have quite enough money to build it, and the local trust loaned us money towards it.
It's an internal loan. It's an internal loan.
No, it's not an internal loan.
Is it not?
No, they're external trusts. It was actually a good way of giving them a slightly better return on their funds, and we got cheaper funding. 3% was a really good rate in those days.
Oh yeah, and the final sort of I guess kudos I had was to our ratepayers for exactly what you mentioned around the best results so far.
So Kelvin, as far as monitoring those interests, so you made a conversation about which way the Reserve Bank will go. You're just constantly monitoring that, and we're using external advice around that, obviously, to achieve the best outcome for everybody.
Yeah, no, we are. We're continually monitoring that and continually monitoring our borrowing requirements. Rates will move up, and our LTP reflected a higher rate anyway, so which was the advice we received from PwC.
Just reflecting on the question too, we're sitting here, David and I, talking around what those cash investments are for, and there's a degree of different reasons for carrying that. Just might be good to, perhaps in the future report, maybe just add that so we give a bit of clarity to the subcommittee. It'd be quite an easy process to just have that tabulated. No further questions. We've got report 5 there. We've got a recommendation. The Audit and Risk Subcommittee received the Treasury report for the period ending 30 June 2021. Do I have a mover? It's Nicole and Shane. All in favour? Against? Carried. We move to page 63, Major Projects Financial Report.
Right, I need to put my hand up here to something straight away. So if we turn to page, it's running very slow here at the moment, sorry, the tier page, there's a error which has slipped through the goalie around the total forecast. The reality is that should be a negative variance is coming out through here. So the commentary is correct, but the numbers just are incorrect there. So I will circulate to the committee a revised number later today. Going back to the start of the report, Selwyn Sports Centre, that will move, now we're heading into a new financial year, out of the report and into an appendix of projects that have concluded. Selwyn Aquatics, the key activity going on here at the moment is the shallowing, not a word. So we're lifting the floor of the old pool.
Yeah.
Just thought I'd create a new word. So we're working through that process, and as you would expect with things which we don't see under a pool, condition found will be a key point here. So we're just monitoring that to make sure that whatever comes from there, we do the right thing. Otherwise, financially, the variance is really unchanged from where we were previously. Tier, look, yes, we are expecting an overrun on this, but when you see the numbers this afternoon, we're out here, it is about 1.4 million over, but we are putting in what we believe to be the outer limit of what that variance could be, and we have a confidence that will come back, but I would sooner put forward something that's a little bit higher than suddenly give you a surprise later on and go, oh shit, oh, sorry, oh below. Health Hub, yes, construction finished on that, but we're just working through tenancies on that, and Douglas may want to comment on that, but there's provision in here for fit outs that may result as a result of those tenancies. Moving on to Pines, not too much to report on this. It is carrying on, and at the last council meeting for the next phase of that, you approved some expenditure on that. Likewise, Lincoln Reserve and Pump Station, nothing to report. And then we move into the other projects, which will be the Rolleston Town Centre and the roundabouts program. These will be brought forward in the next reporting period in the new financial year into the front as major projects, and we'll have that as a much more of a focus, along with the other large projects which have been improved through the LTP now that we move to a new financial year. I'll take questions on that.
Thanks, Kelvin. I guess we will get timely updates if there's any change to that unplanned maintenance at SAC. Just for clarity, David, if that's outside of the time frame of audit and risk subcommittee, will that just come to a briefing, or so we just keep abreast of that? No comments, Douglas, at this stage?
I just add a bit to Calvin's comment there. We do have a problem in that the drainage from the main, what we call the main pool, which is having its depth changed, does have a problem now under the hydrotherapy pool. So the pipe work goes under that. So the pressure testing has raised a problem with a leakage issue. So further work's now being done to see how, because we can't leave this leak as it is. Now you might say, well, do we not know it's leaking? The answer is no. There's no evidence, and there's no suggestion that our water volumes are significant either. But the problem is we're having to change the pipe work in the existing pool. We have to go through and test everything. So James Richmond is just working through with Armitage what pragmatically our best solutions are. And there are ranging from probably a 5,000 fix to sliding a sleeve up through the pipe to fix the problem, as opposed to having to reroute some pipe work. Coming out of that too, we'll be determining, as I say, why has this occurred? Yes. So we have an insurance claim lodged with our insurer on the matter, and so we'll obviously determine ultimately whether it's something we can claim under that process. So without preempting that, Douglas, we've had a number of earthquake events since then, so it could be a possibility it's as simple as that. It could be workmanship errors, could be product failure, so there's a number of things, so we'll be kept abreast of that. Correct, and the difficulty is because we're not going to be, there's no logic at this stage to dig up that section of pipework under the hydrotherapy pool to have a look at it. The question is, why is it under the hydrotherapy pool? That's a good question. And one, it's a design issue that we don't know the answer to, so we'll look into that. But at the end of the day, we just need to resolve this problem and then determine how we best fund that cost. Shane, was it? You first, Shane.
Yes, thanks, Kelvin. When a project exceeds its contingency, where does that money come from?
So we were having to balance with other budgets within there. So potentially having to defer, or to where we've got budgets which are running the other way, we can take those funds, but it's an overall management of the program.
Thanks for that.
Deborah?
My question is probably around the challenges of the refit of the Selwyn Aquatic Centre extension. Can I ask Douglas if we intend to write a report covering all of the issues for future learning, including the design issue that he's just brought forward? Because basically, if we're going to manage some of these contracts going forward, we need to understand, I think, what challenges we've actually come across in some of these design parameters, for not only us to learn, but for others to learn. And I know that we're a governance body, and this is drilling really down to, maybe sort of like an operational level, but, we've taken on these challenges, and there have been some real lessons that need to have been learned going ahead if we are going to actually have successful procurement. The other slight issue is looking at the earthquake proneness of Rolleston. I think we've had a couple of earthquakes in the last couple of weeks in the general locality. Whether they are now factored into the design of all of our buildings, and also the accessibility of the pipework for checking and maintenance work.
I think that makes sense. I mean, we do. We've obviously done comprehensive reporting on the fasting issue that was to council probably 12 months ago, but I think it does make sense. We also need to make sure we have the list of issues we had to deal with, because some issues clearly there are learnings, and others are ones where, because we've been digging into this building as part of the extension program, we are finding things. Like I say, the last one we found, it's not one that there was any evidence that we had a problem until we did the appropriate testing, similar to the problem we had under the ladies' change rooms. We didn't actually realise we had a problem until we did the level checking to make sure when we're bringing the new pipes in. So some things are things we're finding. It's just not good, but yeah, they are being found for a particular reason. So yep, I think a report at the end going through those would be eminently sensible.
Okay, no further questions. We've got a motion there that the Audit and Risk Subcommittee receive the major projects report for the period ending 30 June 2021. I've got a mover for that. Please, Shane and Annalisa, all in favour? Against? Carried. That brings us to the end of the public portion of the meeting. Thanks for everyone looking in and attendances, and I'll ask for someone to move us into PX CAN. That is Nicole and Bob. Thank you. All in favour? Against? Carried.